So now that we've finished the card activity, I thought we could collaboratively come up with a definition of what a microaggression is. So would anybody like to start off with defining what microaggression is? Yep.
Personally, I feel it's something that someone says that make you feel unsafe, and it may not always be deliberate, but you definitely feel like that should not have been said.
Mm-hmm.
So words and actions that make you feel unsafe.
Yeah, words and actions, I like that. Yeah.
Just as Abby said, microaggressions are often not deliberate. They are posed or thought of by the asker as being harmless, just like a question that I'm asking you, like, what's your favorite color? But it also, they tend to be kind of like little things, hence the micro and microaggression. So it's like a little comment that to the person who's posing the question that we're assuming is not part of the same, does not have all of the same interlocking identities as you. And to them, it's a little thing, but to you, it is something that bothers you a lot. So, like, for example, being misgendered or mispronounced or even dead named for trans people, those are all, well, maybe not all completely microaggressions. Some of them are bigger than others. But, if there's, an accidental misgendering, that's a microaggression. Or if a person isn't aware of you being trans and they misgender you because they don't know, that's often microaggression. That is a microaggression.
I think my favorite metaphor, example of explanation of microaggressions is the mosquito bite explanation, where it's some people get more mosquito bites than others. They're small things or interpersonal things that happen between you and another person, not necessarily a big system. They're a result of a system, but not the system acting on you. And they build up over time, and so you might get one, and it might not bother you a whole lot, but somebody else might get 20 in a day, and it's exhausting and frustrating. And then some mosquitoes carry diseases, the way that some microaggressions can have a lot of violence under them or result in violence.
And with microaggressions, one thing I think about is sort of the misalignment between intent versus impact. So the intent maybe is to ask a question or to give a compliment of oh, your hair is so beautiful, I've never seen hair like this, and you touch someone's hair and they're what? That's not appropriate. And so the impact is you harmed someone. And so even though your intentions are maybe good or honorable or innocent, the impact is what's more important, and the impact was you caused harm to someone.
And going off of Kelsey's point, because it's a question that or comment being given that's asked with maybe you could say positive intent or harmless intent. Another thing that happens with microaggressions, because they're viewed as being so little and small, that the minority person who is reacting to the microaggression will be seen as being overreacting to the comment made, and that they're being unreasonable and that they're being emotional, when in reality, just as Annalise said earlier, they build up over time, and a lot of the times people don't see those other interactions that lead you to saying something finally.
So it sounds like as a group we have identified the difference between a micro and macro aggression and how it's a subtle and sometimes indirect action or words that can affect the person that's being spoken to. So now that we have a working definition of a microaggression, I have some questions that we're going to try and answer as a group. So the first one is, what choice do you have when faced with a microaggression? Ashley?
One choice you have is to ignore it and just not think about it anymore and just keep going on with your life.
Okay. I think you have a choice to make about what battles you want to fight, and I think humor is a great way to address a microaggression. Just to give you an example, I'm a person of color. I'm from South Asia. I'm Hindu and I'm an immigrant. So there are a lot of minority identities there. And I remember having a conversation with a friend, and it was just a fun thing, which is often what microaggressions are. And I remember this friend telling me, so you're from India, so you probably eat a lot of curry. And everyone was just quiet, and it seemed like that was just a comment that he said it. You know what, I said, do I want to address this? And then I started thinking. So I knew that he was Canadian, and I said, that's interesting, you're from Canada, you eat maple syrup all the time. And I think we just kept on talking. And that was a nice way to maybe address that. And I felt like I did have a conversation with the person later about why I felt that was inappropriate. And I think that's also important. You're not really trying to call somebody out, but trying to really affect change. So I think humor and knowing what battles to fight are important.
Anybody else? Yes.
I think you also have the option to be angry and upset and to show that. And even though there is a lot of pressure on minorities to like represent an entire group in a really positive light and not fall into stereotypes of being angry or like overly sensitive, regardless of those, you still have the option to show that and be angry and be mad at the person, and you don't owe them any kindness or any calmness.
And kind of going off of that, sometimes, depending on what time it is, depending on what kind of day you had, that is a hill that you are going to die on in that moment. And that's okay. And also, kind of just to like reiterate something that you've probably been noticing throughout all the sessions, but like, whatever you choose to do is perfectly valid. And if you choose to walk away and not address it, that's okay. We don't have the time and the energy to deal with everything, but at the same time, if you choose to stand on that hill and raise your sword and prepare for battle, that's just as okay as well. And neither option makes you less of who you are.
So the second question is, if you are faced with a microaggression, what information do you need to make the best decision for yourself in that moment?
So I think that information that you need to make the best decision for yourself in that moment, I think that you need to think about kind of like what Abby was saying, pick your battles. Like if you feel like you're mentally ready to have that conversation with someone, and you feel like they would be receptive to what you have to say, then definitely you can go the route of educating them and trying to express your feelings to why that you felt like that was a microaggression, or if you feel like you're just going to be talking to a wall and they're not going to be receiving anything that you're saying, then it's totally fine to just walk away. So just kind of like think of how you're feeling at the moment, and if you have that mental energy to deal with whatever route you take.
Another big thing that helps you kind of figure out how to navigate a situation is definitely intent. So like when you're talking to a person and they make a comment and it's very clear that they're obviously trying to make a joke, and that they, even though it's a harmful joke, you can tell that they don't mean anything by it, then that tells you how you can navigate that situation. But if it's a comment or an action being made that is clearly like hateful and has the intent to hurt behind it, it might not be a safe situation to put yourself in to engage with that aggressor.
So I think it's important to kind of understand the relationship you have with the person. So if there's someone that you want to be in your life long term or for longer than just one interaction, then you might want to pause and educate the person or have a conversation with them eventually. But if it's just somebody, walking down the street and they say something about the way you look or the way you talk or things like that, then perhaps you'll just walk on by.
I think sort of building on Alicia's point, thinking about the context and thinking about who are you surrounded by. So if you're alone, that's going to impact your decision. If you're with your queer crew and you're like, we are 5 strong, we can do whatever, like that's going to change things. Or if you're like, you're on your way to Pride and you're like, I've got the entire city on my back right now, I can take on the world. Like that's different versus I'm walking home after school by myself. So I think being aware sort of your surroundings in that sense.
I think also sometimes allies are underutilized in situations like this, where sometimes as an ally, if you're not a part of that minority group, you don't always want to speak over somebody that might be a part of that group in the room. But if you're the one being impacted by that microaggression and there's somebody else in the room that you think could kind of speak for you or take that for you, you can always just say, like, I'm too tired, can you handle this person? Like, I don't want to do this right now.
Like tag in, tag
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Thank you, Michael, for directing our conversation about microaggression. And it's so enriching to hear as a community how we are coming up with ways, so some of the choices that we can make to deal with microaggression, and some internal and external information that we have to assess to evaluate and formulate the choices that we have. So those are step 1 and step 2. So we have made a choice. We have evaluated whether that choice is safe enough to be conducted. So as our step 3, I'm wondering whether I can open up the space to all of you to hear about what strategies do we have for enacting our choices to deal with microaggression. Callie?
I'm a Leo moon, which means I'm very proud and dramatic. And so oftentimes I don't, I'm also like a very emotional person. And so my first reaction to pretty much anything is always more of an extreme emotion rather than like a mellow, mild emotion. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it really depends on where I'm at in the day. Like if I'm just exhausted, I'll get like really angry, but then I'll just walk away and like take the time to think about it. But if I'm 5 coffees in and just like absolutely ready, I'll just kind of blow up at the person without thinking. And I'm not saying it either is better than the other or either are good strategies, but I think it really just kind of depends on how you're feeling overall. And then that allows you to pick if you're gonna like sit on it and think about it, or if you're just gonna kind of immediately react in the moment. But
I think that, the type of person that I am, I definitely am the think about it and react later. I think there's something really nice, especially in like this day and age where we communicate with people constantly, like through technology. And I think that sitting down and like writing a text and putting your thoughts like onto written words is really, I think it can be it's great for self-reflection, and it's great to make sure that you're expressing yourself properly. That I think that you don't get that time in person, especially with something as sensitive as like a microaggression that has like hurt you personally.
One of my favorite strategies with dealing with microaggressions, or just racism in general, is to just be really dumb. So sometimes when you ask if you don't understand, right? And so one of my favorites is the touching of my hair. Oh my gosh, it looked like you were about to touch my hair. That would have been weird. Like, or if someone said like, oh, you're so articulate, I say, oh my gosh, I'm saying the exact thing about you. Like, and that's so, it's so funny that we had that connection there, So I guess that's humor plus playing dumb, which is my favorite skill set because it goes against a lot of the microaggressions that people have about Black women.
Also kind of going off like the notion of playing dumb, it's and it kind of works for any type of hate speech really, or like hateful joke or whatever. But if you ask the person who says it to explain what they just said, they 9 times out of 10 will realize that you're calling them out on a shitty thing without calling them out, without like being direct about it. And also if they are maybe not 100% aware of the fact of like what they're saying is wrong, then by like having them walk through it for you, they'll kind of arrive to that conclusion on their own.
The quota on that one is just jokes. Like basically, if you ever want to make a joke not funny, ask them to explain it, and that always does it for me. I do that all the time.
I think another strategy, sort of building on Louise's, is that there isn't a time limit. So you can be like, so you said this 2 years ago, and I've been thinking about it since then, and like now I'm at a place where we can talk about it. It doesn't have to be, the day of, the day after. You can really sit on it and really think and process your feelings and come up with different strategies and then say it. It doesn't have to be an immediate response. You can be like, I've been thinking about this for a really long time, and now I want to sort of call you in or call you out.
I also think it's really easy to like kind of villainize the person who does that microaggression, but I do think that like a lot of the time, like we talked about, it's not on purpose, and it comes with like us not like unlearning our like biases that we've grown up with. And so I think that it's good to remember that if you're calling somebody out on a microaggression, like if there's somebody that genuinely cares about the friendship that you have with them or the relationship that you share, I think that they would want to be called out, and they would appreciate you being honest with them regardless of even if it's 2 years later. Like if you get called out for something that happened 5 years ago, you would want to know if you care about the person.
So just building on what Annalise said, I feel like as an ally, something you can do is, even if you don't experience microaggressions yourself, if somebody talks to you about an experience where they went through that, maybe just listening attentively and acknowledging that what they experienced was not right. And if possible, and you were in a group situation with a couple of friends, and you know that somebody said something that wasn't wrong to a friend or a colleague, maybe you intervening in some sort of way, because it's very hard sometimes for a person that faces a microaggression to respond because they're emotionally hurt in that particular moment. So it's not easy to think up a response. So sometimes when somebody helps you out, it actually puts you in a position to respond to that situation. So as allies, I think we have a responsibility to ensure that a space is safe and inclusive.
And just talking about the, if you don't have the right response in the moment. So if you're prone to rumination, like I am, I think that one of the prompts for you when you hear microaggression or you experience microaggression and is to give yourself a reminder that today, for the rest of the day, will be self-compassion day for you, so that you can meet that tendency to say, oh, I should have been a better representative of this my minoritized and marginalized identity, or oh, I should have been able to give a funny response when I give a really angry response, or vice versa. I think then the self-compassion has to kick in and enjoy like turn the times where you might ruminate all night into like a funny dream about what you could have done if you had unlimited options, no sanctions on your behavior. And not that actually has to represent the action you'll even do next time.
And I think I loved hearing that our strategies and our action plans are so diverse, and it's reflective of our inner strengths and our past experiences, and of course the environment that we are in. And I also want to take this moment to remind ourselves that even if the choice is that not today, not going to deal with it, let's not undermine that even walking away does not take away the internal emotions that you're experiencing. So give yourself space and time to process those emotions, and whatever you need to do to calm down, going for a walk, dance, boxing, sleep, nap, whatever you need to do. Moving on to our fourth discussion is, when we've co-constructed our definition of microaggression, there was an emphasis of feeling unsafe. So that tells us the importance of processing after the experience of microaggression. And to open the space, if I may, sharing a personal experience was just after I finished my PhD, a person of authority gave me told me something that was perceived to be a compliment. And they said, Maisha, you came to Canada at the age of 12. Who would have imagined that you would be here? At that moment, I was like, oh, thank you. Okay, cool. And hours later, this was like at night, I was hanging out with my friends, everybody celebrating, and I'm like, wait a second. What was that? So sometimes you may not even realize at the moment that was a microaggression. Even if you did, you may not be able to process it. And even if you acted out, give yourself ways to process. So I'm wondering whether we can also come up with our ways of how do we process and cope after experiencing a microaggression. Michael.
So just to start off, I think going back to that example that we spoke of earlier with the mosquitoes, is just to connect back to your point just now, is that sometimes even you don't even notice that you have a mosquito bit you, but it's still annoying afterwards, right? So just to connect back to that. But in order to process, I think something that's really important is the idea of accepting your emotions. So it is okay to cry. It is okay to feel that pain. And I think in today's society with YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, and it's always like the glow, they're always the positive sides of people, and we never see, you know, your breakdown when you're like, crying in your bed. And like I've had breakdowns where I'm crying in the car and I have to pull over, and just because of a microaggression, just like you said, hitting me afterwards. And like that's a valid emotion, and as humans we express ourselves through a wide spectrum of emotions. So hiding one emotion is not actually healthy for us. We need to express it. So if you need to cry, if you need to even vent or what have you, these negative emotions that we consider negative, they're not negative. They're human, and you need to let them out.
I have a particularly effective 3-step process that I go through when I encounter microaggression. So first, I call and aggressively rant to my mother for like at least 45 minutes. That's the bare minimum. And this, of course, can be traded, like, it might not be your mother, but you could just rant with anybody that you're close with that kind of is like a support for you. Then I always take the most aggressive nap. Like, I'm talking like dead to the world for a couple of hours. And this could also be replaced with a walk if that's more your speed, but I like to sleep. And the third thing I do when I wake up from the nap, the first thing that I do is I open my notes app on my phone, and I basically type in what I was feeling when it happened and after it happened, and then I keep that note to bring up with my therapist when I then go see her whenever that next appointment may be.
Okay. So thank you. And I think what we are hearing and what we have heard from everyone, that the choices, the strategies, the way we process it, there is no right or wrong way to it. Everybody has their own way of doing it. But I would say monitor yourself, ask yourself what is working, what is not working, and seek out resources if not. And I think for the last part, again, just very briefly, if you can just shout out a statement or share a statement. So if somebody comes up to us sharing that they have experienced microaggression, what is it that's something we can say to show our support? Quick, brief.
That sucks.
Love it. Thanks, Kelsey.
Are you okay?
Yes.
I think asking like, oh, is there anything that I can do to make you feel better?
All right. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. And if this was an uncomfortable conversation for anyone, we have come up with strategies to cope. So use your internal and external resources. Thank you.